Hello, everybody. These days we celebrate here in Israel the centennial to the writer and the essayist Jacqueline Cahanoff. Her main ideas was the importance of the dialogue between the Levant and the West, or the encounter between the Mediterranean and Europe. A critical reading of the essays she wrote from the end of the 1950s in newspapers and journals in Israel and elsewhere, especially in France and the States, some of which have been collected in 3 volumes, revealed a systematic theory of a universal nature which is not necessarily concerned with a particular social sector or ethnic group. Cahanoff's theory of identity was rooted first and foremost in the Mediterranean space in which Israel is situated, a space that serves as a bridge between East and West. In this, she joined major Israeli intellectuals who formulated cultural options of spatial identity presented to the Israeli society. Cahanoff's Mediterranean proposal was before her time, and today it seems the most reasonable option that serves as a minimal common denominator for the growing social tensions and increasing sectorialization in Israel. Cahanoff's writings did not emerge out of a void, nor did they come out of Israel. Until the age of 24, she had lived in the British colonial society in Egypt, and in her words, it can be said with some certainty that the Egyptian-born Jews of my generation felt deeply ambivalent about belonging or not belonging, Well, Jacqueline Shochat was born in Cairo in 1917. Her father came from established family from Iraq, and her mother was from Tunisia. She grew up in an upper-class Jewish community whose cosmopolitan makeup permitted studies in French, writing in English, and conversations in Arabic. Her life in this society of multiple identities gave her the vision of a homeland without boundaries, in which the individual was simultaneously a member of several different communities. Cahanoff grew up with people like herself, a medley of religions, peoples, and cultures, as she wrote, it's a beautiful paragraph, in Egypt with British High Commissioner, and a Turkish aristocracy, and a Jewish bourgeoisie, and Italian commerce, and Sudanese servants, and Greek intellectuals, and French culture, and Egyptian nationality. She was really rich. The next stage in her biography took her to France, and then to 20 years to United States. She learned journalism in Columbia University in New York, and literature. Her stay in New York in the Colombian milieu of immigrants, exiles, and intellectuals gave birth to a first novel, Jacob's Ladder, that was translated just a year, 2 years ago here in Israel. and short autobiographical novels which won her prizes. In the first story, she wrote outside Egypt, Cairo weddings, all the boundaries between the generations, between classes, between the sexes, and between Western and Eastern traditions were crossed. Cahanoff's answer to Israel provinciality and ethnic nationalism was to formulate a Mediterranean model, which she said was a symbiosis of cultures. In 1954, she immigrated to Israel and lived in Bat Yam, where Israeli intellectuals often gathered in the living room of her home. And her essays were published in various journals in Israel, especially in Keshet, under the editorship of Aaron Amir. She was friends of Amos Oz, Yoshua Knaz, Alevet Yoshua. She also translated, Aaron Amir translated her to Hebrew. She just wrote in English and sometimes in French, and edited her first collected essays, Mimizrach Shemesh, from East the Sun. About a year later, in 1979, she passed away. There is no reason why we in Israel should ipso facto accept the European assessment of the Levantine any more than we accept its assessment of the Jews. Somebody said. The Israeli had an added value due to the multicultural experience they had accumulated. She wrote, "We have returned to our roots here in the Levant after we have gained, and at what price, an abundance of experience throughout the whole world, historical, political, scientific, social experience, and we have adapted to the modern world without losing our specific identity. We have activated something latent on the strengths of the Levantine experience. The lack of national identification and simultaneously belonging to many places left its marks on the members of the minorities in the Mediterranean region. The stages of her life and the cultural sources from which she drew, for example, she was friend of Edmond Jabez. She wrote about Charles Péguy, Claude Vichet, Albert Camus, Albert Memmi, and others, were enriched Cahanoff identity and writings and gave her a refreshing critical perspectives full of vitality on Israeli society in its initial decades. Cahanoff's biographical tensions found a solution in the Mediterranean option she proposed to the Israeli society in process of formation. She has played an active role in the debate on Israel's Mediterranean identity. As a precursor or an intellectual personage, Cahanoff may become a criterion for an understanding of the different forms of identity in Israel's cultures in the making, of questions of East and West and the intermediate areas, and of the place of Israel in the Mediterranean geocultural space. Cahanoff's identification with Israel's Mediterranean image is so self-evident that she has been called the bringer of the Mediterranean spirit, the first lady of the Mediterranean, and the representative of the Mediterranean idea. Yoshua Praver, my teacher of medieval history, wrote in his book on the Crusaders, Mediterranean culture is a synthesis or confections of religions and cultures that were formed on the shores of the sea or close to them, and that influenced each other until there was a kind of symbiosis, a cohabitation, cohabitations, as sometimes uncomfortable, always productive symbiosis of these cultures. Cahanoff described Israel's Mediterranean option in similar symbiosis terms. She wrote, Israel's situation is unique because this process of cross-influence and cross-mutation takes place in the same country, which is Levantine, with regard to its geographical position between East and West, and because of the mixture of its population. For that reason, it can fuse the two main elements in its composition into a dynamic and productive unity, like the outstanding Levantine cultures of the past, Byzantium and Islam, which were also a fusion of inhabitants and cultures, as Western Europe was also in its formative period. Well, as a promoter of the Mediterranean idea, Cahanoff branched out or divided from a prevalent confrontational or oppositional reality towards a broader, rich, and polyphonic mesh of geopolitical cultural elements. Her grasping of Israel together with her biographical and creative journey made Cahanoff the herald and initiator of a different cultural possibility, far more extensive than that offered in her time, and also perhaps is being offered now. Well, Cahanoff was the new immigrant to the state founded by David Ben Gurion, a state which is intended to be Western and secular, but he did not always think that way. At the 9th Zionist Congress in 1923, Ben Gurion said that the Mediterranean does not have to be the frontier of our land, but its continuation and extension, and our link with the great Jewish centers in the diaspora. Thank you.